Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to today's session. My name is Arpana Sharma. I'm the Manager Alumni Relations at UOWD. It gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to tonight's session on building corporate agility and resilience. This is in collaboration with UOWD Faculty of Business and British Standards Institution and part of our ongoing Coffee Talk with the Experts series. The format of the session will be as such. Once I have completed the introduction, I will hand over to the speakers who will then present their sessions. There will be time for Q&A at the end of the session. We invite you to type your questions in the questions box in the control panel. Then we will formally close the session. Without further ado, let me introduce you to our guest speakers. Quentin Dustin, Principal Consultant, Organizational Resilience, BSI. Quentin has over 25 years experience in consulting and business development and joined BSI in 2015. Quentin has worked with many global organizations, helping leadership teams develop strategies, and has designed and facilitated many management programs for organizations undergoing complex change processes. His current role involves thought leadership activities in organizational resilience at BSI and working closely with client organizations to help develop their strategies to grow and prosper and develop sustainable futures. Dr. Mohan Guruswamy, Faculty Strategy and Corporate Governance, UOWD. Dr. Mohan has over 2 decades of experience in the areas of strategic planning, international business, and corporate governance. He has the distinction of being associated with industry as well as academics on a continuous basis. He was formerly director of EMBA and MBA programs in the University of Wollongong in Dubai. As a domain expert in the field of special economic zones, he has delivered international keynote speeches, conducted development workshops across the globe, published research articles, and edited and published 2 books. Currently, he is in the Faculty of Business in University of Wollongong in Dubai and advises large corporates on strategy and knowledge management. Over to you, Dr. Mohan.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Arpana, for that wonderful introduction. Good evening, all the participants. A very warm welcome once again into this session. It gives me the pleasure to connect with all of you on this platform. And I will be sharing with you some thoughts, some experiences in the field of agility and resilience. My presentation focuses on the macro strategic perspective, and my distinguished fellow speaker, Quentin, who is a global domain expert in the field of resilience, will focus more on the specifics of what and how of resilience. In the next 20 minutes or so, in my sharing some of my experiences with you, I'm going to look at it from 3 perspectives. One, a historical perspective. Over a period of few decades, what kind of organizations have been agile and resilient? What have been their strategic focus? Then we come down to the current context, what has been happening recently, how it has had impact. And then I will share with you the way forward, a set of recommendations of how to build organizations into agile and resilient entities. And all this is from a macro perspective. So let me start with historical perspective. If you look back, go back a bit in history, in the 50s and 60s, the strategic focus of most of the organizations were on cost. Anyone who could produce a low-cost product could become a winner. Come the 60s and 70s, it was quality movement started when TQM and Six Sigma and all these quality concepts started gaining importance. So apart from cost, anyone who delivered a quality product becomes a winner. 80s was the era of speed of delivery. Whoever could reach out to customers much faster than their competitors had an edge over others. Shrinking of the production cycle time was the focus, and speed. Come the 90s, it was flexibility, what we call customization. You know, not just one pair of shoes, but you realize for each sport, whether it's basketball, soccer, tennis, aerobics, fast walking, running, you have separate customized products available. Subsequently, in the next decade, it was of after-sales service. This is where CRM or packages like customer relationship management came into picture. And the last 10 years, if you have noticed, internet and e-commerce have played a very, very significant role in organizations becoming successful. Now, my question to you all audience is, what do you think will be the strategic focus in the next 10 years? A new decade has just started, and I want all of you to start responding about your thoughts in the platform that's provided to you. Start writing, and when it comes to Q&A, I will try and respond to your thoughts and also share my thoughts as to what type of strategic focus I see in the next 10 years. So this is like a small challenge for you to stimulate your thinking. Please feel free to start responding right away. The second point that I want to make here is, if you look at the top 10 companies of 2008, top 10 in the world, most of them were energy-based companies. Come 2018, if you notice, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, all are technology-oriented companies. Some more food for thought. If I were to draw one more table and say 2028 or even 2030, what do you think would be the focus of those successful companies? So having seen a bit of history, let me bring you now to the current context. This is where our topic becomes extremely contextual. In the last year of the last decade, international organizations, domain experts around the world predicted an uptick in the economies of the world. But as soon as the new decade started, the pandemic, very first month, possibly very first week, and we are faced with a major global health issue, which in turn has an impact on the economic health of various nations. We have seen lockdowns, embargo on travel, social distancing. Overall, there has been a lot of despair, volatility, or uncertainty. What is the impact of all this? You know, the economies have been forced into inactivity, and this has had impact on a few areas. One, overall, the global wealth started depleting. World output of both goods as well as services slowed down substantially. Consumptions weakened. But what was the biggest hit is the international trade, which reduced substantially. Now, somewhere around April, IMF forecasted, rather estimated, a loss of $9 trillion globally. And very recently, World Bank has further downgraded it. So things don't seem to be very rosy, but let us see what kind of action plans we could suggest to you to come out of this and become resilient. Some of the worst affected sectors, as you know, aviation, travel and tourism, hospitality, currencies and stock markets have taken a hit. A number of governments have taken measures of providing stimulus packages, accommodative monetary policy, and so on. Experts talk about possible recovery routes. Typically, we used to talk in the past about V and U recovery. Economists used to talk about V is within about 2 or 3 quarters you recover. I think we've crossed the stage. U may take about 4 to 5 quarters. W, which is another, if there is a recurrence in some parts of the world, we are observing this. And very recently, American universities have talked about a swoosh-shaped recovery, meaning we will go back, but not to absolute same speed with which we were growing, and we may slightly taper off. It will look like, say, a square root shaped recovery. All this is leading to 3 major challenges. In fact, this was highlighted recently in the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development report. And the experts, researchers there said, there are 3 challenges which we are going to face. 1, the changing patterns of production network. 2 is the digitalization of economy. And 3 is the sustainable development imperative. Let me take you through each one of these very quickly, and then share with you some of the recommendations of how to address these challenges. The logic here is the organizations which are prepared and which are able to face these challenges, overcome them successfully, will be able
Dr. Mohan, we are unable to hear you or see your presentation.
Just give me a second. I think I've lost my
Unable to hear you still, or can't see the presentation as well.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
The connection keeps dropping, Dr. Mohan. I'm not sure whether it's at your end. Quentin, Pelin, are you experiencing the same issue? I just want to make sure it's not just my connection here.
Yes, it's dropping out of the unmuted part.
Whatever I'm
No, it just started a few seconds back. Initially, it was fine.
okay. So the first 5-10 minutes I've spoken was.
The initial part has been all audible. It's just recently the connection has been dropping out and we can't see the presentation as well.
Okay. Now can you see the presentation?
We can't hear you at all right now. Dr. Mohan, would you like Quentin to commence his presentation while we sort the connection, or what would your preference be?
I didn't hear you. Can you say again?
There we go.
Okay, we can see your presentation now and hear you
I
as
can't
well.
see it. Okay. Let me see, but I can't see it. So I need also my presentation in front of me. give me a second. I'm so sorry. The first time ever it has happened. I make so many international presentations. Can you hear me, see me, and the slide now?
Yes, to all three. We can see you, we can see the slides, we can hear you.
Perfect. No, when I go on the slide, I can't hear you. So now I assume all of you can see me. I'm just trying to get it confirmed one more time. You can hear me, see me, and see the slide. Yeah, perfect. So I was talking about the three challenges and how to face and overcome them. And let me take you through one by one. The first one refers to the changing patterns of production network. The competitiveness scenario in the world is changing. What does it mean? You know, typical supply chain, you have a supplier, a manufacturer, a dealer, retailer, so traditionally, for a manufacturer, the other manufacturers are competitors. For a dealer, other dealers are competitors. But if you're just become a virtual organization, and the competition will be between one chain and another chain. Take, for example, a company like Unilever. It has a supplier in 3M and a retailer in Walmart. They have something called inter-organizational information system. And through that, they operate as a chain, and the whole chain will be competing with other chains. You may be the strongest manufacturer, but if your chain members are weak, you will still not be able to be the winner. So resilience needs to be through chain concept where you become a virtual organization. A lot of organizations are looking at building new business models. A classic example which I like to share is Elon Musk tried to get into the satellite business, and he found it's very, very expensive. So he thought, why not I make it? And he changed the whole business model. What happens when a satellite, which costs millions of dollars, gets launched? When its life cycle is over, it is pushed into the sea and keeps lying there. Now he, along with his research team, came up with an idea. Is there a possibility to capture this, recycle, reuse, and the 30 to 40% of the cost one was able to reduce in making the future satellites? So businesses will have to innovatively think of what next and how to run business. The network effect, which we talked about there, a very interesting concept. Typically, when we do planning, we do what are the materials required to manufacture. Then you have not only material, but people, machine, the whole manufacturing resources. The third level is called ERP, where you do enterprise-wide resource planning. The fourth one, as I was telling you, is the supply chain-wide planning. And unless organizations are part of a strong chain, individually, even if you build a lot of resilience within your company, if your chain members' resilience is weak, it will still affect you. Finally, what we talk about a network is a very, very interesting concept. Now, once you have a chain, there will be several chains and they are all networked and interconnected. Let me give you a very interesting example here. You go to a vending machine, a mobile number is mentioned. You dial the number, you get a can of soft drink. Now, $1 from your bank gets deducted, goes to the soft drink company. What has happened here? Your mobile AT&T or Etisalat, whatever you're using, is in a telecommunications chain. Your bank has its own chain, and soft drink company has its own chain. But all these three chains are networked. Imagine a future where every gadget talks to every other gadget. and there is a complex network between the various chains which communicate with each other. And that is where the world is moving towards. Most companies have reached stage 3. A few advanced companies have reached stage 4, and 5 is the future, which will lead to what we popularly call Internet of Things. Yeah. New industrial revolution, the next challenge, almost self-explanatory, robotics, big data, 3D printing, autonomous vehicles, all these are going to cause huge revolution in future. Autonomous vehicles could influence logistics. Yeah, robotics will replace certain skills and competencies. AI, I mean, today morning we had a discussion on the role of AI in education and also how to build it into our curriculum, because this is going to be the future. The third challenge is sustainable development imperative. We need to be going green. We need to be sustainable in terms of our development. A very simple explanation. Sustainable development is development where we try to satisfy our current needs without compromising on the ability of future generations to satisfy their needs. In our enthusiasm to generate more revenue, make more profit, we should not be misusing, overusing the resources. The resources in the world are finite. They are not infinite. So if we misuse, overuse, or abuse them, we will not be leaving a green, clean planet for future. So one of the areas that one needs to look at is sustainable development, and this is where the United Nations Global Compact would make SDG and measurement of all these 3 areas mandatory in future. International Labour Organization has something called Decent Work Agenda, where you need to provide appropriate environment to people. And renewable energy, waste management, and HMS all contribute, health and safety, to sustainable development. This is what is in store for us in future. What should we do? 3 areas going forward. For businesses, for governments, and for academic institutions. In a way, the 3 key pillars of economies. The businesses need to strategically reorient them to address those 3 challenges: sustainability, digital revolution. Regulatory bodies need to make policy reforms which have to be compatible with these future practices. Very importantly, educational institutions need to repackage the value propositions. Last year in summer, I was in Boston. I went to meet some friends in MIT. MIT talks about a stack of skills. No, not the traditional, everybody studies the same set of subjects in a class. You can pick and choose 5, 6, 7 skills that you want, which makes you employable so that you are ready for the industry from day one. Understand from businesses what skills they want and pick up those skills in the stack of skills, equip yourself, and you will be productive in the industry from day one. This is the way forward. But out of this, our focus is on businesses. We'll leave the policy reforms to the government. We will leave repackaging to universities and educational institutions as a forum in which we are talking about business practices. Let us see what are strategic reorientation recommendations. Formulate an enterprise-wide risk management strategy and implement it. Become tech ready, go green, become eco-friendly. In fact, I'm on the board of World Free Zones Organization. There are 3,000 zones in the world. I head the knowledge committee there. We've developed something called Green Zone Certification. And this certification will possibly become mandatory in future. You need to measure how green you are and ensure that you continue to be on the higher end of the green score. And all these are in the pipeline coming soon. Review your business processes and develop agility and resilience by becoming dynamic operations. Constantly adapt yourself, and you need to also periodically keep developing capabilities, reskilling and upskilling. Few more minutes I take before I wind up. For businesses, make use of the stimulus packages which government is offering. Companies through their associations could represent to the government to get additional incentives. Now, irrespective of what the recovery is, be ready for the worst, be future ready. There'll always be losers and winners, but winners look for opportunity during uncertainty, and losers look for excuses. So my final concluding slide, in the beginning, I talked about situation being vulnerable, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, lack of clarity. All this leads an organization to become fragile. What you need to do is have a clear vision, keeping in mind what is in store for us, and in a proactive, planned manner, prepare yourself in terms of going green, becoming digital, getting that technology in place, and so on. Understand the environment, have both role and goal clarities, and environment keeps changing, and you need to adapt yourself. If we shift our mindset from the VUCA 1 into VUCA 2, as it's called, that will help us in building agility and resilience. Thank you so much for patiently listening, and I hope all of you have raised some interesting questions, which after Quentin's presentation, I'll be very happy to respond. Thank you.
Just trying to show my screen. Where are we go? Are you able to see my screen now? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I can just reduce this down. Okay, let's put it on slide view. Can you see that?
Yes.
You can see the screen, great. Okay, I just want to get it onto slide view. There we go. Okay, so my bit of the talk, thank you very much for that, Mohan. That was really interesting. It gives you an overview of how complex the world is and the sort of many challenges that people are facing. So my role in BSI is to look after sort of the thought leadership around organizational resilience and help clients tackle some of those problems. And obviously the word resilience has really become very popular, and people now start to understand what it actually means because of COVID. So I want to talk through what it's like to sort of work with businesses, and these techniques I'm going to show you sort of will resonate with individuals as well. So just as if you're planning your career and starting to work out what you might be doing, then some of the techniques that I'm going to show you now will also be useful. So I want to just give you an introduction to organizational resilience, and then look at what the questions are that people in business would be trying to address, and then why scale and focus matters to organizational resilience, how to benchmark an organization and why that's important, and then the leadership behaviors that are associated with steering organizations through challenging times, getting them ready to do that and being able to come out the other side in a healthy position. So the first thing we'll look at is what organizational resilience is about. Now this BSI looks after writing standards in the UK, and they're public. They often go on to become international standards. And standards themselves are effectively statements of best practice put together by experts in industry and stakeholders and interested parties. And one of the standards that caught our CEO's eye was one on organizational resilience. And this was about 5 years ago. And I just want to run through this particular definition to give you sort of an example of what it means. Now, it's a very dense definition. It's a really good definition summed up in a very quick paragraph. So I just want to go through that with you. So the first part of the definition, it's the ability of an organization to do something. So business is focused on making things happen. That's really, really important. You can have as many plans as you like in the world, but unless you can make something happen, the organization will struggle. And I've worked with many organizations that have plan after plan after plan, but nothing happens. So this first part is really important to think about, and we'll look at why that's important in a minute. The second part of the definition, or the second line in the definition, is to anticipate, prepare for, respond, and adapt to. So what this is about is effectively showing that there's a timeline involved in business. And if there was no timeline, it would be very easy to run businesses. There would be no tax returns to fill in, no bills to pay on time, no worries about supply chains and so on. But the timeline is really important, and these are getting sharper, tighter, faster, and more important to organizations. So this timeline part is an essential bit of organizational resilience. The third line is to cope with incremental changes and sudden disruptions. So this is the sort of the nature of the type of change that organizations have to prepare for. Is it something that's unexpected, or is it something that evolves slowly over time, sort of a creeping sort of change? And finally, the reason for doing that is in order to survive and prosper. So businesses, as they grow, the risk factors get slightly less as a business grows because it's more able to cope with these difficult changes. I remember running a small firm, and one mistake in a small firm can cost the business. In a larger firm, sometimes you can retrieve yourself from a mistake. And all of that's written in this BS 65000, which is a guidance document on organizational resilience. So people can't certify against this. It's just a guidance framework, but it gives us a clear view of what it is that we're looking to do. So let's have a look at what each of these means. In terms of the ability of the organization will depend upon the leadership, and that goes all the way through the organization, not just the top. It's the leadership teams and how people lead within the organizations. The people themselves, are they informed, aware, trained, competent, adaptable? So you can see if that links quite clearly with Dr. Mohan's talk, that this flexibility is really important within organizations. So it's no longer a career for life. It's what are the skills that you can build up that you can adapt and change and take with you and transfer between companies. It also relies around processes. So are they efficient and effective? And what sort of things govern the way those processes work? So there may be unwritten rules, standards, or ad hoc, or it might be improvised, but the processes are really important. And then the product, key for why you're doing that, and includes the services. Does it meet the needs of the customers? And most importantly, is it profitable? Because if it isn't profitable, the business will find it difficult to survive. The anticipate, prepare for, respond, and adapt to part is all about horizon scanning. So plan, do, check, act. What can you do to sort of foresee what you think is coming down the track at you? because again, if we can sort of work out what we think that is, and it's uncertain, then we can start formulating our plans to respond to that. Incremental change and sudden disruptions, that's evolution or revolution. So look at the nature of changes that are going on at the moment. They're getting faster. With social media and the spread of the internet, it's easy to get information now, which a letter now can be done in seconds, whereas it would have taken 3 or 4 days in the past. And then finally, in order to survive and prosper, are we sustainable? Will we be here? If we don't do this, if we're not aware of how these things work together, then the business has got very little chance of surviving in the long run. So that's the definition which we use for organizational resilience. If you Google that, that will come up as top in terms of definitions. So let's have a look at an organizational resilience compass. So the first thing, the North Star, is what is your purpose, vision, or mission? So you saw that was in the leadership part of the definition, that we need to understand what the purpose of the organization is. What's the vision? What's the mission? What's it trying to do? Why does it exist? And that has been severely challenged with shocks such as COVID, where some people have had to repurpose what their organizations do in order to survive. And then we've got the ethos of the company. Does your culture, values, and behaviors support the achievements of your goals? They're aligned throughout the organization, because without people, organizations don't exist. So we have to think about the numbers and the way the people work to achieve those numbers. The S is the strategy, is what resources do you need to ensure that you can make your journey, that you can actually do what it is that you want to do to get to the North Star part. And then finally, the winning ways bit, the W of the compass, is really what frameworks and systems and processes do you use to develop, promote, review, and sustain winning ways in your organization. Now, this is, again, there are certain organizations that have potentially the same purpose or vision, but the culture and the way that they go about the business is very, very different. And you pick the culture up quite quickly when you go in to see different businesses. And the culture has an impact on people's willingness to make winning ways happen. Is it an aggressive organization? Is it a collaborative organization? Does it do it by coercion, etc.? So addressing any organizational resilience challenge requires understanding, first of all, what's going on in the business. It encourages you to think about what's the focus that needs to be used to enable planning and action to happen. So if you imagine using a telescope and looking at the night sky, if we look at it with a naked eye, first of all, you see stars all over the place, assuming it's a clear night. But if we use a telescope, we can zone in and zoom in and get to quite specific details. So part of the challenge of organizational resilience is understanding what is the scale that you need to look at for the organization and where do you need to focus. So I'm going to explore those with you now. So there's a really good thing that came up in Harvard Business Review in November 20 called the OODA loop, which I think is very good. It's a bit like plan, do, check, act, but it's a variation on it, but it's observe what's going on, orientate your staff and the people around you and the resources, decide what to do, and then act. Notice that act bit is really important. If you don't act, nothing happens. So let's have a look at the system, and this is a nice metaphor to help you understand it. Central to most organizations will be the client. The client is absolutely key to organizations, and around that I've put 4 stars, so 4 planets rather, so leadership, people, process, and product. And these work together, but they're all focused at the client. When they don't work together, we don't have an organizational that's resilient. So we need to make sure that those 4 things, those 4 planets actually work together. If we zoom in a bit, there may be specific areas that don't work well together. And also you'll notice in this drawing, in this slide rather, there's shooting stars and there's meteors also flying around. These impact the planet's movements and the surface of the planet, and it's exactly the same in the business. So there are external shocks which can occur, which can be catastrophic, or they can be just minor. We can choose to avoid some of them. So we need to understand where to look. So in order to do that, what we did was we looked at some key standards and tried to think about how teams resolve resilience challenges. So often when I go into organizations, they say, well, BSI knows about organizational resilience. You know all about organizational resilience. Tell me how you can help me. And the answer to that is, I can't until I know what the problem is. And sometimes the client will know what the problem is and they'll know how to solve it. Notice I haven't put the why question in because the why question is normally answered by the business as part of its vision and purpose. But what is it that we're trying to do? And then how do we go about it? So that's a very simple equation to solve. But now it gets a little bit more tricky when the organization doesn't understand what it needs to do, but it understands how to go about tackling a problem, but it doesn't know what problem it's trying to solve. And then we've got the third one, which is deductive logic. It knows what it wants to do, but doesn't know how to go about it. So there are processes involved in there. And the final one is the really problematic one when you're working with clients. They don't know what they want to do and they have no idea about how to do it. So obviously there's a lot of debate and working with the leadership team to get them to go through those. But they have to eventually tackle the what problem. So BSI looked at some 4 standards and worked out that there were 16 really key elements that have to be looked after. And these are a bit like spinning plates. You don't need to look after them all at the same time, but there will be times where your focus must be on certain elements of this. So top of this, driving this, is what happens in the leadership element. So this is the leadership team and teams that are with it. It's not necessarily just the CEO, it's the whole way leadership works. Is the vision and purpose clear? Do they understand the reputational risks involved in what decisions they're taking? Very key, financial aspects. So strong balance sheets make it easier to get through challenging problems. And then resource management, where resources are moved to be most effective within the business. And that can be very challenging. So sometimes resources have to be managed, have to be moved to places where they're most appropriate for the survival of the business. And then we get into the people part. So what is the culture like? What's the community engagement like? So they're stakeholders. Does the business look after awareness and training? And importantly, are the people aligned behind that? Do they understand what the purpose is? So often I've been into businesses where the leadership team has come up with a great slogan about what the intention of the business is. But actually, when you go through an organization and ask people, do they understand it? You get different definitions of that. So quite categorically, alignment hasn't occurred. And then we've got the processes part. So I've put governance in process because governance effectively controls how the leadership and the people behave within the organization. You'll see business continuity in there. And again, just draw that out. Business continuity tends to be with looking after organizations as they go into a bounce and coming out of it. Organizational resilience is a much bigger scoped area, and I think is becoming more prevalent within organizations. And then 2 very key ones, supply chain, which Dr. Mohan mentioned, and then information and knowledge, how your cyber security works and how you manage information, because that informs leadership about where to pay attention. And then finally, we've got the product part, which is the product and services, horizon scanning. What is happening within your markets? to change the direction that you're trying to go in? What do you need to do to take the next step? So innovation is central to that, and you can see the speed of innovation is happening much, much faster. And I'll talk to that about how BSI have tackled that in a minute. And then finally, adaptive capacity. So your ability to flex and to change, to be able to do things differently. So if you're a manufacturer of CDs and you know streaming is coming online, what do? Do you keep going with CDs, or do you start to think about what your vision and purpose could be? So just leave that as an open question. So what BSI did is we started to look, we went out to global leaders and asked them lots of questions, but two in particular about these 16 elements. One was, what was the impact? How important effectively was this particular element to you? And also, how well do you think you're doing? So you can see we've color coded these. So the black ones are the leadership parts, the red ones, the process, blue ones are the people, and green ones are the product. And there was quite a definable pattern. You could see if you ask leaders, are you good at leadership? Most of them are going to say, yes, I'm great at leadership. So we'd expect them to see them top right. But now when you start going into individual sectors or individual firms, you get differences in these patterns. And one of the hard bits working with organizations, particularly at the top level with boards or with senior leadership teams, is they don't often like to discuss what's going on. They protect what they're doing. So one of the tricky bits is to get what's called the elephant into the room so we can actually talk about it. So here's an example of how we would do that. So this is for a global healthcare sector. This was in a 2019 survey. And you can see quite a distinct pattern there about how the global health sector viewed these 16 elements. And notice horizon scanning is quite low. They see it as important, but their performance, it's not very good because it's future thinking. So Dr. Mohan, again, has encouraged you to start thinking about where your future is going to be and how you can adapt to that. So now we go to a particular company, and you can see that their pattern is very different from the global average. And we've done, I think there were 1,300 companies surveyed. This is all CEOs surveyed, but this particular company, this is a real company, I've obviously disguised who they are, had a very different view of where they were. Now we can take this a bit further and start to put this onto a radar graph. So we've done exactly the same thing, but now just looked at how well they're performing. So this was for a particular company versus the benchmark. The blue line is the company, the red line is the lowest 25% quartile. So anything that's below that red line starts to raise questions around what's going on. Now, I won't know the answer to those questions, but when you're working with a company, they will understand the narrative that's causing that. And actually a bit of research starts to reveal that. So is innovation a problem, or their ability to change may be difficult? So reputational risk is worrying, resource management's low, culture is different. You can see there are things that might need or raise questions in there to help them understand where they are. Now, again, that's a very useful step to take with the leadership team, because this is all done anonymously. And then this is a company compared to that sector. So it's very close to it, but they can see now that within the sector, they're very close to what's going on within the sector. But the blue line is the company, the red line is the lowest 25% quartile. So now the narrative really starts to come to the fore. Are we similar to the whole industry, or are there specific problems facing us as a group? Now, from that, we then start looking at, well, what are the leadership behaviors that are take place as a result of this. And this is some really interesting work that BSI did with Cranfield. Just sort of draw on the axes first of all. So these are about leadership behaviors. So we talk to the leaders about what's going on in the business, but now what sort of behaviors are required to move to a particular position. So you can see on the bottom axis, it's defensive, i.e. protecting results against achieving results, progressive. And then consistency, goals, processes, routines, standards may be in there, and flexibility, sort of developing ideas. Now, it's very common for businesses to go, well, when we get a problem, we start to centralize things. We start to move our functions towards the center. And if you look at the history of organizations, you'll see different functions within the organization have different power plays as they go forwards. Is it the accountants? Is it the salespeople? Is it marketing? Is it HR? So preventative control is the sort of the stabilizing one. It sort of holds things stable and it makes sure that things are being done correctly and properly. But as people notice what's going on, we move to the right, and mindful action starts getting to people to think more openly about what's possible. So that's sort of more increases the flexibility. And then we get to the third quadrant, which is the top left, which is about noticing how to improve and exploit. So this is things like cost reduction, things like improving efficiency and effectiveness of the way you work. And again, you heard that coming through in Dr. Mohan's talk earlier. And then the final quadrant one, which is perhaps the one where people think, oh yes, that's the one to be in, is the adaptive innovation, where you start to think creatively about what's possible. Now, organizations do all four of these. So you can see this red kite in the middle, this shape. And while this is a sort of an idealized version, we play with this, and it's a bit like stretchy rubber that sort of can be pulled apart. And the shapes are different for different organizations. And when the leadership team have worked out or have started to play through where they would like to be, given that there's a challenge, they see that the behaviors have to change. And that's really, really important, because being defensive and consistent is very different from an organization that's progressive and flexible. You might think Apple, for example, would be in that top right-hand corner, but it isn't. It's actually a very good, consistent and defensive organization with small areas or functions that are very progressive. So think carefully about what's going on with the behaviors. So this is a very, again, another useful tool that helps us explain to people how change can occur. So here's an example in real life. So this is a few years back now, but it gives you shows you that we sort of have done this on ourselves. So I did this exercise with the group exec and the non-group exec. So the group exec is about 8 or 9 people. The non-group exec is about 100 people. And you can see quite clearly from here that the group exec believed that they were better in all of the areas compared to the non-group exec, which started to raise questions. And the questions that I want you to notice the lowest point is innovation, horizon scanning, and adaptive capacity. So here's our response. This is what BSI did as a result of this, because the narrative starts to get exposed and we talk about it. So we appointed an innovations director. We started to get involved in what's called immersive technology. Some of you may have heard of immersive audits. And that led to us developing with partners sort of ways for clients to do remote audits. So you can see the lady in the picture has got a camera on her glasses where she can look at things. So instead of having sort of people going to sites, we can ask people to walk around with these cameras and headsets on and show us what's going on. And this was shortlisted as part of one of the Reuters events for Responsible Business Awards in 2020. We didn't win it, but to become a finalist at that level is quite something. So this shows you how these tools can be used to help organizations work better in future. If you want to find out more about what we do with organizational resilience, please visit the website. The web link is up there, and you'll see these 4 things. So the organizational resilience framework tells you all about how we look at this. The index, you can have a look at various indexes that we've done over the last 3 years. I'm currently working on one at the moment. And I think also within this site, you'll find the information on Cranfield's work with us, which looks at that strategic tension quadrant, which I think is really important for leadership teams. So that's the end of my talk. I hope you found that interesting and food for thought. It is a fascinating subject. I mean, it has been brought right into the fore because of what's going on, but organizational resilience has been there since the year dot. It applies to a one-man band right the way through its global organization, right the way through to economies, right the way through to the way the world works. So I hope these tools and sort of insights have given you a bit of a view about what BSI does and why this is so important. So good luck with your careers, and hopefully you'll be able to use some of the things in there to stimulate your thinking about the direction your career wants to go in as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mohan, Quentin, for a very insightful presentation. There were so many points of references that both of you touched upon in your individual presentations. Dr. Mohan talking about adaptability, innovation, resource management, the importance of not the organization being resilient, but also the people and the supply chain being resilient. The resources are not unfinite, they are finite, so we have to be very careful. And then we had Quentin speaking about leadership, people, processes, products. And also, again, the same points that came up, the importance of being adaptable, innovative. So while I don't see a question from our audience, maybe I just see one from Ahmed. Maybe Ahmed can explain what you're referring to, Ahmed. That will be very helpful. I would like to ask a question, and probably Dr. Mohan and Quentin can respond to that. Is we talk about resilience and we talk about adaptability. So how have you seen this come through with COVID-19 happening?
Okay, so if you look and watch the way that organizations have had to deal with some of these crises, there'll be opportunities to think differently about their business. So, and they have to do that in the context of the regulations that are taking place. So, for example, you'll see restaurants turning to takeaway meals. You'll see people who do, let's say, bridal gowns, because there are going to be few weddings going on, they will turn to make PPE. There'll be engineering, particularly, has responded well in producing many ventilators. So plans were shared. BSI shared many standards which were put into the public domain for free, which helped the global effort, if you like, to combat something that's a difficult disease. So there are many instances where organizations have to think differently, and that's difficult. I mean, when you're under emotional pressure because your bills need to be paid and finances are struggling or whatever, to think differently is really hard. That's probably the biggest challenge. So look out for the way that people have adapted and changed, because there are many examples.
Thank you, Quentin. Dr. Mohan, yourself?
Yeah, sure. Very interesting and good question. See, there are certain businesses which have got disrupted, and there are certain businesses which possibly got a fillip, got uplifted. This is where I feel the winners look for opportunities, and the losers always look for reasons as to what went wrong. In every calamity, there is an opportunity. It's just as very rightly Quentin said, question of a mind shift. We need to start looking at things differently. We need to, this is why I believe business models will change in future. It's not just product process innovation, the way we are running business. If you look at our own university, the way we are reaching out to students, the way we market our product, the way we even develop our products would change, and how we deliver this, all these would definitely go through massive changes. All we need to do is keep eyes and ears open, look for opportunities, adapt ourselves, and innovatively come with solutions to the problems.
Thank you so much. Anyone has any other questions, or I have another one that I am.
Can I ask one to Mr. Quentin?
Yes, please.
Yeah, sure.
Please.
More to learn, because he is a global domain expert in the field. I like the 16 factors which you highlighted. So you have a metrics, you have a measure, like a pre-assessment questionnaire, which tells where an organization is. Then you provide inputs. Can you throw some light on that, please?
Yeah, so there are two ways that we do this. The first way is an individual can do it just by going onto the website. So that link that I showed you, sort of check your business, you can have a look at that. An individual can do that, and you get a radar diagram. The real power, though, comes from a deeper dive set of questions that we use for each of those areas. For each of those elements, we ask sort of 3 questions, which sort of probe a bit deeper. And we often ask organizations to do that at different levels within the organization. So it might be the senior executives, it might be the middle managers, it may be a function or a region. And then we collate the results, and then we play them back to the organization. And in doing so, normally the narrative starts to become apparent. You know, is there flexibility in the organization? Is there a power struggle going on? Is there something that's stopping them doing what potentially they could do? Which is difficult. You know, that requires quite careful facilitation, but that enables them to start realizing anonymously that there is an issue or a challenge or challenges. And often those challenges are linked. So a very important point is that those elements, although they might work individually on their own, normally there's collections of things. So financial pressure is causing problem with, say, resource management, or it's causing problems with adaptive capacity, or they've got an old resources that requires investment. And the tricky bit with organizations is that you need to sort of act before the cost of acting becomes too great. So if we call this sort of sleepwalking into disaster, so it's a bit like somebody rowing a boat towards a waterfall that they know is there, but they're so close to it they can't do anything about it. So having these talks early around what the problems are and looking at the issues that are taking place enables them to sort of plan forwards and actually react more speedily. And it's quite surprising how quickly you get consensus once you start playing these, well, the empirical evidence back to people. Does that help?
Excellent, Arpana.
I see 2 questions here, so I will just read them out very quickly. Sohaib Abdul Rahim, warm welcome. So you are asking the panelist, is it a mindset for digitalization? And after the panelists have answered that, I'll go on to the next question.
Well, in my, not necessarily. So there will still be opportunities to do all sorts of things, but digitalization is effectively the next big thing. You know, it's so prevalent, but again, you've got to think that digitalization can also have problems. You know, at some point there will be something that impacts digitalization. So whether it's a huge cybersecurity threat or something like that. But yes, I mean, we've got used to working at home. We've using this technique now to talk to you. I'm sure university courses are going online rather than face to face. It's something that we've had to adapt and change to. But I don't. It is important, but it's in the context of everything. So sustainability, green revolution, all of that, the way that people are now starting to view the world differently. Oil will be sort of declining. They think oil has peaked in terms of demand. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that's the sort of thing you've got to look for. So if that's going to be the case, what's next? And that's the tricky question. It's understanding what's next. So nobody knows. You've got to take an educated guess at it, and you guys will be the people that will make those decisions.
It's a very interesting question. I appreciate everything is about mindset. I remember reading an interesting definition of failure. In a running race, if you fall down, it's not a failure. But if you refuse to get up and run again, that's a failure. Yeah? So the resilience is all about getting up again and running, irrespective of what you face. So again, it's a question of perception when it comes to digitalization. Things seem to be moving at a phenomenal pace. In the last 20 years, whatever developments have taken place are a few hundred times more than the previous several hundred years. And that speed is increasing, and digitalization is certainly playing a role in that. So this question is valid. It's all in the mind. Resilience itself is all about mindset. It is not. It's emotional resilience. Yeah. In fact, recently in Barcelona, I was talking in a technology conference. I said, coming from subcontinent in India, I believe in spiritual resilience. If you have strong faith, everything will happen good. You be good and good things will happen. So there is a resilience of the highest level. Please, Arpana.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Quentin and Dr. Mohan. We've got another question from Matthew. A warm welcome to the session today. So he's asking, we tell organizations to be agile and flexible. Where is the room for consistency if the organization is being too rigid or too flexible? Great question.
Right. So I'll leap off with this one again. So these are not pre-prepared. So I've got to think a little bit on my feet. So we all recognize that the retail environment is changing. The high street is changing. Online has escalated greater than ever before because of COVID, people's inability to go to the shopping. But people go to retail shops for an experience. And part of saving retail, if you like, is for retail organizations to think about their clients. Why do they come in? It's not, obviously there's the touch and the feel of things and to be able to see that, but there's also the experience of what something adds in terms of value, whether it's, you know, the social aspect of shopping. But organizations have to respond to that, and that's tricky. And it requires agility to be able to do that. And I don't think it's impossible by any means, but they do have to think about it. I remember when I went to America quite a while back now on a business trip. I remember going into REI, which is a sportswear place, and they had a climbing wall, and I'd never seen anything like that in a British retail unit ever. And I just thought that's brilliant. You know, they're talking to people about the product, they're letting people have a go, they're doing things which people watch. There was an experience around it. And I think that's really important. And the internet will find it difficult to create that experience. It's different. Okay.
I think it's a question of striking a balance between rigidity and flexibility. Anything in extreme is unhealthy in any area. Yeah. So extreme flexibility can lead to chaos, like you don't know what next, and no rules of the game. But being extremely rigid stifles you from creativity and innovation. So, and that so-called optimal point or delicate balance is very difficult to define. You could come up with an operational definition depending on the context, but it's difficult to get that exact balance point, the best operating point, as in called in production management. It's not easy when it comes to this. Please.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, that the idea of rigidity and flexibility is really important, and it's not necessarily just the people who are running the retail units who have to do that. If you look at it in terms of a system, the tax system, how organizations are taxed at a retail level, has a big impact on whether they survive or not. Now, when you get a drop in footfall, such as we've had, to keep a fixed cost going at the level that it is, causes businesses to go out of business. So the flexibility also has to come from the governments or local authorities understanding how to tax and when to put pressure on and when to take it off. And I think that's also become apparent during this. So it's not easy, and the rigidities might be within the system rather than at an individual level, so a retail unit level. That explains part of it.
Thank you so much. Would you have any question for each other? Because I have one question that I'm really keen to ask. But if the two of you want to ask each other any questions, then please go ahead.
Well, the first question is, where do you think business is going in the future? So you raised that as a question right at the beginning of your speech. Unfortunately, we didn't see the slide, but it was a question that was raised. Where do you think the world's going in terms of that?
You're referring to what will be the strategic focus
Yes.
in the next 3 years. Yeah. It has shifted. Emphasis has shifted. Of course, the next one has not replaced it. It's cost plus quality plus speed plus flexibility. I think 2 or 3 areas. The sustainability imperative is definitely going to give the edge in future. Digitalization is going to give greenification. And look at all the triple bottom line, not only just make money, but ensure our operations are green and display social responsibility. So I think looking at the future, the speed is going to be phenomenal. One, organizations who are able to very quickly adapt themselves. This is where the whole your concept of agility and resilience also comes in. So if I have to draw a list there, I would include these two plus sustainability, digitalization, and the triple bottom line. The organizations which seem to be following this would certainly be successful. But as I said, there are other stakeholders in the game, not only the business. The government has to make reforms appropriately. I was once advisor to Port, Customs and Free Zone. So Customs is a regulatory body. It needs to make reforms so that the trade flow is smooth. Yeah? And educational institutions have to prepare right skills. Yeah? And they need to redefine, they need to repackage, as I said, their value propositions. If these 3 things go hand in hand, and if an organization happens to be in an environment where all 3 are supporting each other, yes, we will get there. So even organization as a standalone cannot have its own strategic focus and yet say, I will definitely be successful. It's dependent on the whole ecosystem in which you're operating.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, Arpana, your final question.
Yes, my final question. Would you say that the definition of resilience does not change over time, and that when the environment or the ecosystem changes, the definition of resilience also changes?
Well, I think that I would never say never. It's it may change. We don't know. At the moment, I check sort of that definition against everything I do, and it seems to work really well. There's a time scale, there are different sorts of changes. People do this because they want to survive and prosper. There might be additions to it. So there could be something to sort of echo what Dr. Mohan said, was about sort of looking at stakeholder values could be in there. Something that's sort of that leaves us sort of the world in a better place than you found it. That might eventually come in there, but at the moment it's not in there. Interestingly, I'm on the revision committee for that particular standard tomorrow, so we'll see what people say. You know, I think it'll be really interesting. That's how standards evolve, because people start to think about it. They come up against different evidence. So far, it seems to work fine. The 16 elements, again, work fine for most of the things that we're trying to look at. But who knows, as we evolve and as we start to look at things change. And that's the thing you can be certain of, things change.
Thank you.
Interesting.
Dr. Mohan, yourself.
Yeah, interesting question. Before talk about definition of resilience, I want to take you one step behind and give you the definition of definition. As a researcher, having been teaching research methodology in the past, definition can be looked at from a generic definition and an operational definition. Sometimes, depending on the context, we operationally define certain concepts, and there are some generic definitions. Most concepts, when the context keeps changing, may shift the emphasis of that definition over a period of time.
Yes.
Many concepts have gone through changes in their definitions based on the context, and therefore a lot is contextual. To say that it's a universal paradigm, probably the only statement, as Quentin said, never say never, is the only statement, or change is the only constant, probably is the only statement which you can say with guarantee. Everything else is operational and contextual.
Well, it's taxes and death, the other two.
Thank you so much. I will, for the want of time, I see another question. So are you okay if we take one final questions, after which the audience can get in touch with you individually if they have any queries? Are you okay with that?
Sure.
Okay, great. Saud, thank you so much for your question and a warm welcome. So Dr. Saud, he's asking, in certain organizations, reliability, dependability, and availability are highly important. Resilience is important, but extreme agility may threaten these indicators. Any comments?
So the first three again. So it's reliability.
Yes, reliability, dependability, and availability are highly important. Resilience is important, but extreme agility may threaten these indicators. Any comments?
Yes, they might. So there's always an adjustment period whenever you go through change, without any doubt. So if you think about a change curve that people go through, they'll react to it, they'll be angry, they'll go through sort of a fairly predictable sort of path. So the reliability, dependability, availability are all what I would say as structured frameworks. They are the rigidity, and that is really important to an organization. So, you know, the thing that you'll hear all the time when this COVID thing is going on is that businesses are finding it very difficult to plan because there's uncertainty. If they had certainty, you'd have reliability, dependency, availability, but they don't have that. And the trick is to be able to work in what are called VUCA environments. So we mentioned that earlier. So volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. So yes, those do get, I think, you know, this is obviously off the cuff, but I mean, yes, they will get affected. But once the new norm becomes established, you go back to reliability, dependability, and availability. So agility is really important. If you're not agile, you will not survive. But it's choosing when to move, when to change, how much that change should be. You don't have to throw everything out because you're changing. So often innovation tends to be incremental. Sometimes it requires a big change. The big change normally come through catastrophic events or calamitous occasions, or through lack of planning and they've left it too late. That's the other thing. And then those three things then fail. Does that make sense? So yes, they are important, but they will also shift if you're agile, but then it'll restabilize. You get to a new norm.
Yeah, interesting question. Personally, I don't see a contradiction here. I can be reliable, dependable, and agile. Let me explain how. We can't look at an organization in isolation only internally. Organization is in a system. It has to constantly interact with external environment. If the external environment changes under the garb of reliability, I can't be rigid. I need to be agile and adapt. So adaptability is a very important point in today's context, or right from Darwin, yeah, survival of the fittest. In order to be adaptable, you need to be agile. If you are, you can be, see, reliability is consistency. I can be consistently agile. I can be dependable and yet agile. In fact, agility will lead to consistently face external environmental changes. I would say agility leads to reliability. If you are not agile, you will not be reliable, because you will keep doing the same thing which you did 5 years ago, whereas environment needs something else.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. You could be superb at manufacturing something, but if the whole market has moved on to something else,
Correct.
You're still being those three things, but nobody wants your product or service. So you have to be agile.
And in research, we talk about reliability and validity. Reliability is about consistency. Validity is about, are you really testing what you intend testing? Sometimes you can be consistent and you could be consistently testing wrong thing. It may be reliable but not valid. Yeah?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
both are important in research, and so they could go hand in hand. Yeah, perfect. But
Great.
very good, very interesting question. I really appreciate this.
Thank you, Dr. Mohan and Quentin. My takeaway probably would be resilience is such a vast discipline, and it is a complex discipline. So, there are so many other factors into play that organizations need to take into consideration, and it's the whole ecosystem that you've been talking about. So thank you very much for a very impactful, meaningful, and insightful session. Truly grateful for your time. And if anyone has any questions, please feel welcome to get in touch with us, and we'll put you in touch with Dr. Mohan and Quentin. Dr. Mohan and Quentin, over to you to say the final thank yous for the evening.
Okay, well, thank you very much for attending. I've enjoyed sort of talking what I'm really passionate about. Please look out for things on the news and in your local environments to see how this all fits together, because it is a big picture concept. It's something that's going on all around you every day. I can guarantee that's one of those 16 elements will be mentioned in news programs. So on the radio, if you're in your car tonight and you're listening, check them out. They'll come up. They won't necessarily talk about specific words, but those things will be there. And that's what business people are always sort of wrestling with, and the challenges. I think it's really interesting. I've just reflected on that last question and the reliability, dependency, availability. Dr. Mohan was talking about that in terms of the way education is having to change as well. I could definitely say it's dependable, reliable, and available, but businesses are saying, well, look, we want transferable skills. We want you to come business ready. And that's different. That's different from where it was. It's certainly different from when I graduated. And within 5 years, it changes very, very quickly. So talk to people that you want to talk to as employers, or people who are in this sort of field, and you'll find out what they're talking about, and that's really important, I think.
Wonderful. Firstly, thank you, Arpana and Ahmad from BSI. Both of you coordinated along with your respective teams and put a fantastic show together. Thank you for actually giving an opportunity to be on this forum, and I could meet such global domain experts like Quentin. Gave me an opportunity to interact, learn. I thoroughly enjoyed being on this platform, and I only wish we could meet all the people and deliver a face-to-face session someday, or at least try and get all of them on camera, see them, and then talk.
Yeah.
Very often when I do this in Australia, tomorrow morning I'm doing a session for Sydney Business School. Every participant will be on the screen, so you feel a bit more connected. Today I couldn't see even myself. I was only seeing my slide, and I was talking half the time, probably a few minutes. You lost me, and I was not even aware of this because I was not looking at the chat. But hopefully things will change. This is where we need to be agile and adaptable to even these challenges, overcome them. This shows our resilience of overcoming these hurdles. And soon, I think 2021, I wish extreme good luck to all the people who are present here. I follow a simple philosophy, and I like to preach it to everyone, which is be happy and spread happiness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again. A good day to everyone from whichever part of the world you're joining us. It was fantastic to have you all. And thank you to BSI, Quentin, Ahmed, our alumnus, for this fantastic opportunity, and my colleagues, Dr. Arijit, Dr. Mohan, and Karishma from my team as well, Pelin and Maria from BSI. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone, or good day wherever you are. Hope to see you all soon. Take care and be safe.
Thank you.